A kind-hearted woman used sign language to help a lost elderly woman, unaware she was the deaf mother of the billionaire CEO who would change her life. "You are 10 minutes late, Miss Thorne." Again. The rain hammered down on the grimy windowpane of the bus stop, each drop a tiny, desperate fist trying to break through the glass and reach Alara Thorne. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the worn, threadbare cuff of her coat for a split second before darkness swallowed the city whole again, leaving only the flickering, unreliable glow of a street lamp. She clutched the thin strap of her bag closer, the biting cold seeping through the cheap fabric and settling deep into her bones, a familiar ache that mirrored the hollow space in her chest. The wind howled a mournful song through the gaps in the shelter, a sound that echoed the weary sigh that escaped her pale lips. She was so tired. The exhaustion was more than physical. It was a soul-deep weariness that came from fighting a battle that never seemed to end, a relentless tide of bills and worries that threatened to pull her under. Her son, Leo, was the only reason she kept her head above water, his innocent smile the single, unwavering light in her heavy fog. She thought of his small hand in hers that morning, his bright eyes looking up at her with such complete and utter trust. A quiet, selfless love for him was the fuel that kept her moving, the steady beat of her heart against the sterile silence of her despair. He deserved more than this life of leftovers and mended clothes. He deserved warmth and security. He deserved a future. She checked her watch, a cheap plastic thing with a crack across its face, and her stomach clenched. 20 minutes late now. Ms. Vance would be furious. The thought of her boss's thin, cruel smile and her crisp, cutting words sent a shiver of dread down Alara's spine. Every day at the sterile, polished offices of Vance Enterprises felt like walking on splintered glass. She was a ghost there, a low-level data entry clerk whose presence was barely tolerated, her quiet dignity mistaken for weakness. Alara adjusted the worn scarf around her neck, a gift from her late husband, the fabric now so thin you could almost see through it. It was all she had left of him, besides Leo and a box of faded photographs. The memory of his gentle laugh was a tender, raw ache, a sacred space in her heart that the world could not touch. But memories didn't pay the rent. Memories didn't fill Leo's small stomach. She needed this job, this soul-crushing, demeaning job. She had to endure. She had to be strong. For Leo, the bus finally arrived, its headlights cutting through the pounding rain like two weary eyes. She climbed aboard, the warmth inside a momentary reprieve. As she found a seat, she saw her reflection in the rain-streaked window. A pale, gaunt woman with haunted eyes, a fragile ghost of the person she used to be. She closed her eyes. Just get through the day. At the other end of the city, in a cavernous, stately mansion where the only sound was the soft click of a grandfather clock and the relentless hammering of the rain against the ornate glass roof, Alistair Vance felt a different kind of cold. He stood before a massive window, his impeccable suit a suit of armor against a grief that still felt as raw and unbearable as it had the day his father died a year ago. The room was filled with polished marble and gleaming antiques, but it felt hollow, empty. It was a museum of a life, not a home. His father's presence had filled every corner of this place. His booming laugh, his steady advice, his unwavering love. Now, there was only a sterile silence that echoed the void in Alistair's own heart. He had inherited everything. The global corporation, the immense wealth, the commanding power. But he felt like a king ruling over a kingdom of ghosts. His focus on the company had become an obsession, a way to numb the pain, a way to honor the man who had built it all from nothing. He worked relentlessly, his days a blur of meetings and numbers, his nights spent alone in this cavernous house. He was successful. He was powerful. He was profoundly lonely. His mother, Genevieve, was the only other living soul in the mansion, but a wall of unspoken grief and misunderstanding stood between them. She had been deaf since birth, and his father had been her bridge to the world, his hands her voice, his eyes her ears. They had shared a secret, silent language of love that Alistair had always admired but never truly understood. Since his father's passing, Genevieve had retreated into herself, her vibrant spirit dimmed, her eyes often distant and filled with a shattering sorrow. Alistair tried to connect with her, but his sign language was clumsy, hesitant, a poor imitation of his father's fluid grace. Their conversations were stilted, painful reminders of all they had lost. He saw the frustration and sadness in her eyes when he failed to understand her, and it felt like another failure, another piece of his father he couldn't live up to. This morning, she had left a note on the polished mahogany table in the hall. The note, written in her elegant, looping script, simply said, "Going for a walk. Need some air." He had felt a familiar pang of guilt and helplessness. He let her go, knowing she needed her independence, but a seed of worry was planted in his chest. The storm had rolled in so suddenly, so violently. He glanced at the clock. She had been gone for hours. The worry began to grow, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He grabbed his keys from a silver tray. The silence of the house was becoming unbearable. He had to find her. The bus shuddered to a stop, jolting Alara from her worried thoughts. She stepped out into the pounding rain, pulling her thin coat tighter around her. Her office was just 2 blocks away. As she hurried down the sidewalk, head bent against the wind, a small, frantic movement caught her eye. Under the awning of a closed bakery, a woman stood, looking utterly lost. She was elderly, with silver hair plastered to her head by the rain and eyes wide with a desperate, frightened confusion. She wore an elegant but soaked wool coat, clearly not dressed for such a vicious storm. People rushed past her, their faces hidden under umbrellas, their minds locked on their own destinations. No one saw her. No one stopped. Alara hesitated. A single selfish thought flashed through her mind. "You're already late. You can't afford to be any later." Ms. Vance's face, contorted with rage, swam before her eyes. But then she looked again at the woman's trembling hands and the sheer panic shimmering in her eyes. It was the look of someone who was not just lost, but completely disconnected from the world around them. Alara saw a profound vulnerability there, a silent plea that resonated with her own quiet suffering. Her own hardship had not hardened her heart. It had made it more tender, more attuned to the unspoken pain of others. In that moment, her own problems seemed to shrink. She took a deep breath. She could not walk away. It was not in her nature. Her job could wait. Person could not. She changed course. She approached the woman slowly, gently, so as not to startle her. "Excuse me, ma'am," Alara began, her voice soft against the roar of the storm. "Are you all right? You look lost." The woman looked at her, but her eyes remained blank, uncomprehending. She didn't respond, only clutched her handbag tighter, her knuckles white. A flicker of understanding sparked in Alara's mind. She noticed the woman's eyes darting, watching Alara's lips, a common habit for those who relied on lip reading. But in the dim light and pouring rain, it would be almost impossible. Alara remembered the sign language classes she had taken years ago, a skill she'd learned to communicate with a childhood friend. It was rusty, but the fundamentals were ingrained in her memory. It was a long shot, but she had to try. She held up her hands, palms open in a gesture of peace, and then began to sign, her movements slow and deliberate. "Are you okay?" The woman's eyes widened. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. The change was instantaneous and seismic. The fear in her eyes was replaced by a wave of disbelief, then a flood of immense, cathartic relief. Her shoulders, which had been hunched against the world, relaxed. She signed back, her hands moving with a fluid, desperate grace. "Lost. My address is in my bag, but cannot see." Alara understood immediately. The woman's hands were trembling too badly from the cold and fear to retrieve the note, and her eyes, clouded with age and distress, couldn't focus in the poor light. "Let me help," Alara signed, offering a gentle, sincere smile. The woman nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. With the utmost care, Alara took the woman's polished leather handbag. She found a small, crisp piece of paper inside, a note with an address written on it. It was for a stately manor on the other side of town, in the wealthiest district. She showed the address to the woman, who nodded again, a fragile, grateful smile finally touching her lips. A sleek, black car had pulled up to the curb on the opposite side of the street a few moments earlier, its engine a low, powerful hum beneath the storm. Alistair sat behind the wheel, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been circling the area for 20 minutes, his anxiety mounting with every passing second, when he spotted his mother huddled under the awning. Relief warred with anger. Anger at himself for letting her go out alone, for not being there for her. He was about to get out of the car when he saw a young woman approach her. He froze, his hand on the door handle, a surge of protective instinct rising in him. He watched, his eyes narrowed, ready to intervene if this stranger meant his mother any harm. But then he saw the woman's hands begin to move. He saw the slow, careful signs, and he witnessed the transformation in his mother's face. A look of pure, unadulterated relief he hadn't seen in over a year. He watched, stunned into silence, as the stranger, this pale, weary-looking woman in a threadbare coat, communicated with his mother more effectively and with more genuine compassion than he had in months. She was a beacon of quiet, selfless kindness in the middle of a storm. He saw her open his mother's bag, find the note, and show it to her. He saw the gentle, reassuring smile she gave. In that moment, something inside him that had been frozen for a year began to thaw. It was a profound, undeniable shift, a reawakening of a part of his heart he thought had died with his father. He didn't know who this woman was, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that this moment would change everything. Alara knew the address was too far to walk, and a taxi would be expensive. She looked at the elderly woman, at her soaked clothes and trembling frame. A warm drink was what she needed first. Alara made a quick decision. Come, tea, warm, place, she signed, pointing to a small, humble cafe just down the street. The woman, whose name Alara learned was Genevieve, looked at her with such pure, innocent gratitude that it made Alara's heart ache. She took Genevieve's arm, holding her steady, and sheltered her as best she could with her own body as they made their way through the rain to the cafe. The bell above the door chimed softly as they entered, the warm, steamy air a welcome embrace. Alara led Genevieve to a small booth in the corner and ordered 2 cups of hot tea, paying with the last few dollars she had, money that was supposed to be for her own lunch. It didn't matter. She watched as Genevieve wrapped her trembling hands around the warm mug, a soft sigh of contentment escaping her. Alara simply sat with her, a steady, calming presence. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. A silent, unspoken bond had formed between them, a moment of shared humanity in a cold, indifferent world. After a few minutes, when the color had returned to Genevieve's cheeks, Alara used her phone to call a taxi. When it arrived, she helped Genevieve inside, made sure the driver had the correct address, and paid for the fare from the money she had set aside for Leo's field trip. As the taxi pulled away, Genevieve looked back, her hand pressed against the window, her eyes conveying a depth of gratitude that words could never capture. Alara watched until the car vanished. She was now an hour late for work. She was cold, soaked, and had no money for lunch or the bus ride home. But as she stood alone in the rain, she felt a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. She had done the right thing. That had to be enough. She arrived at the office, her shoes squelching on the polished marble floor, leaving a trail of damp footprints. Ms. Vance was waiting for her, standing by her desk like a predator, her arms crossed, a look of cold fury on her face. The entire office had fallen into a sterile silence, every pair of eyes fixed on Alara. An hour and 15 minutes, Miss Thorne. Ms. Vance's voice was a low hiss, dripping with venom. Do you have any idea how your tardiness affects the productivity of this entire department? Do you think the rules simply do not apply to you? Alara's face was pale, her hair still damp. She stood with a quiet dignity, refusing to crumble under the weight of the public humiliation. I am so sorry, Ms. Vance. There was an emergency. I stopped to help someone who was in trouble. Ms. Vance let out a short, cruel laugh. An emergency? You stopped to play the Good Samaritan? Let me make something perfectly clear to you, Elara. Your job is here. Your responsibility is to this company, not to every stray you find on the street. We are not a charity. The words were like sharp, icy shards, each one piercing Elara's already fragile composure. She clenched her hands into fists at her sides, her knuckles white. It was an elderly woman. She was lost and deaf, and she was terrified. Elara explained, her voice trembling slightly but steady. She needed help. Ms. Vance took a step closer, her eyes gleaming with malice. I don't care if she was the Queen of England. Your personal life, your misplaced altruism, is of no concern to me. This is the final straw. Your performance has been lackluster, your attitude sullen, and your attendance is now officially unacceptable. The silence in the office deepened. You do not belong here, she hissed. Pack your things. You're fired. The words echoed in the cavernous room. Fired. The word thudded against Elara's heart, stealing the air from her lungs. She felt the blood drain from her face. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She looked around at the faces of her colleagues, some filled with pity, others with a cold indifference. No one said a word. No one met her gaze. She was utterly alone. A sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it down, refusing to give Ms. Vance the satisfaction of seeing her break. With unshakable, dignified grace, she walked to her small, gray cubicle, packed her few personal belongings. A photo of Leo, a small potted plant, her late husband's favorite pen, into a cardboard box. She did not look at anyone as she walked out of the office for the last time. The heavy glass doors clicked shut behind her, the sound final and absolute. She was gone. Alistair had followed the taxi, keeping a discreet distance. He watched from his car as the kind stranger helped his mother from the cab and saw her safely to the door of his mansion. He waited until the taxi pulled away before getting out. He found his mother in the foyer, being fussed over by the housekeeper, a warm blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up as he entered, and for the first time in a year, her eyes were not distant or sad. They were bright, alive. She rushed to him, her hands moving with an excited energy he hadn't seen since before his father's death. A woman, so kind. She signed. She helped me. He felt a profound, seismic shock. His mother was animated, engaged, connected. This stranger had done in 1 hour what he had failed to do in a year. She had broken through the wall of silence and grief and reached the mother he remembered, the mother he missed so desperately. What is her name? He signed, his own movements feeling clumsy in the face of his overwhelming emotion. Genevieve's face fell slightly. I don't know. I never asked. A fresh wave of guilt washed over Alistair. He hadn't even thanked her. He had just watched, a passive observer to this incredible act of selfless kindness. He had let her walk away, back into the storm without a single word. He felt a fierce, undeniable need to find her, to thank her, to repay her. This wasn't about charity. It was about something more, something sacred. She had given him a gift beyond measure, a glimmer of hope for his mother and for himself. He had seen the name of the cafe on the small, steaming window. It was a starting point. He turned to his mother. I will find her, he signed with a new, unwavering resolve. A new purpose ignited within him, a warm, golden glow spreading through the cold, hollow parts of his soul. He would find the angel in the threadbare coat. The next few days were a blur of despair for Elara. The final paycheck was barely enough to cover the rent, and the security deposit for a new apartment felt like an insurmountable mountain. She spent her days scouring job listings online, sending out resumes that seemed to vanish into a digital void. Each rejection email was another small cut, whittling away at her hope. She put on a brave face for Leo, laughing and playing with him in their small, cramped apartment, but at night, after he was asleep, the fear would creep in. She would sit in the dark, the flickering light from the street lamp outside casting long shadows on the wall, and she would cry silent, desperate tears. The world felt relentless, a cold, unfeeling machine, and she was just a fragile cog about to be ground to dust. She was a good person. She worked hard. She was a loving mother. Why was it so hard? One afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It was a delivery man with a large box of groceries. Alara stared at him, confused. "There must be a mistake," she said. "I didn't order anything." The man checked his receipt. "Alara Thorne? Apartment 3B? It's all paid for." He set the box down and left. Alara opened it, her hands trembling. It was filled with everything she and Leo needed. Fresh fruit, vegetables, milk, bread, even a small toy car and a box of Leo's favorite cookies. There was no note, no indication of who had sent it. She sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Was it a mistake? An act of charity from a neighbor? The next day, a crisp, white envelope was slipped under her door. Inside was a money order for the exact amount of her month's rent, and a small, unsigned note with a single word typed on it. Hope. A sob of raw, cathartic relief broke from her lips. It felt like a miracle, a ray of golden light breaking through the heavy fog of her despair. She didn't know who was doing this, but this anonymous savior had given her more than just food and rent money. They had given her time. They had given her a reason to keep fighting. Alistair had found her. It hadn't been difficult. A quiet inquiry at the cafe, a generous tip to a waitress who remembered the kind woman and the lost old lady, and a discreet check of public records gave him her name and address. He had driven to her neighborhood, a stark contrast to his own world of stately mansions and polished avenues. He saw the worn-out buildings, the struggling storefronts. He saw her through the window of her small apartment, playing with her son, her face illuminated by a soft, tender love that made his chest ache. He learned she had been fired from her job at Vance Enterprises, his company, on the very day she had helped his mother. A cold, hard anger settled in his gut. He had a sudden, visceral understanding of the kind of petty cruelty that thrived in the corporate world he now commanded. His father had always said, "A company is only as good as its people, Alistair. You take care of the good ones." He had been so consumed by the numbers on the balance sheets that he had forgotten the people. This woman, Alara Thorne, was one of the good ones. She was the best of them. He arranged for the groceries, the rent, all anonymously. It was a start, a small, inadequate gesture to repay an immeasurable debt. But it wasn't enough. He wanted to know her, to understand the source of her quiet, unwavering strength. He found himself driving past her apartment building every day, watching from a distance, feeling a strange, protective pull towards this woman and her small son. He was no longer just the grieving son or the cynical CEO. He was becoming something else. He was becoming a hidden savior, and it was healing him in ways he never could have imagined. A week later, Alara decided to take Leo to the park. It was a beautiful, sunny day, the first one in what felt like an eternity, and she wanted him to feel the warmth of the sun on his face. She felt lighter, the anonymous gifts having lifted the immediate, crushing weight of her desperation. As Leo played on the swings, his laughter echoing in the clear air, a man sat down on the bench next to her. She glanced over and her breath caught in her throat. He was handsome, with kind eyes and a quiet, commanding presence. But there was a deep sadness in his expression, a haunted look that she recognized because she saw it in her own reflection every day. "He has a wonderful laugh," the man said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. He was looking at Leo. Alara smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Yes, he does. It's my favorite sound in the world." They sat in a comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the children play. "I'm Alistair," he said finally, turning to her. "Alara," she replied. They talked for over an hour. It was easy, natural. She found herself telling him about her struggles, about losing her job, about the mysterious gifts that had appeared like a miracle. He listened with a steady, unwavering focus, his eyes never leaving hers. He made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in a very long time. He didn't offer pity or platitudes. He just listened. Then he began to speak, and she saw the source of the sadness in his eyes. He told her about his father, about the unbearable weight of his loss. He spoke of his mother, and the wall of silence that had grown between them. He didn't mention that he was a CEO or that his last name was Vance. He was just Alistair, a man drowning in his own grief. Alara's heart went out to him. She understood his pain, the profound loneliness of grieving for someone who was the center of your universe. She told him about her husband, about his sudden illness, about the hollow ache his absence had left behind. She spoke of how her love for Leo was the only thing that kept her anchored. They were two strangers on a park bench, sharing their most sacred, tender wounds. A bond forged in shared sorrow, a quiet understanding that transcended words. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Alistair turned to her. "Alara," he said, his voice thick with an unspoken emotion. "You are the strongest person I have ever met." Her eyes glistened. No one had ever said that to her before. Everyone always saw her as fragile, as someone to be pitied. But he saw her strength. He saw her. They met at the park every day after that. Their friendship deepened, a slow, gentle blossoming of hope in the barren landscapes of their hearts. Alistair found himself feeling again, the heavy fog of his grief beginning to lift, replaced by a light he hadn't realized he was so desperate for. Alara found herself smiling more, the weary lines around her eyes softening. For the first time since her husband died, she felt the stirrings of something new, something she had thought was lost to her forever. She was falling in love. He was falling in love with her too, a pure, undeniable love for her selfless heart, her quiet resilience, her unwavering goodness. But he kept his identity a secret. He was afraid that the truth of his immense wealth and power would change things, that it would shatter the fragile, genuine connection they had built. He just wanted a little more time to be just Alistair. One morning, Alara received a certified letter. It was from Vance Enterprises. They were demanding she come to the office to sign some final termination papers and collect her last, meager paycheck. Her heart sank. The thought of facing Ms. Vance again, of stepping back into that cold, sterile building, filled her with dread. She told Alistair about it when they met at the park. He listened, his expression hardening, a muscle clenching in his jaw. "You shouldn't have to go through that alone," he said, his voice low and firm. "Let me come with you." Alara was touched by his offer. "You don't have to do that, Alistair." "I want to," he insisted. "I'll wait for you in the lobby. Just knowing someone is there for you might make it easier," she agreed, a feeling of warmth and gratitude spreading through her. She wouldn't be alone. The next day, she walked into the gleaming, cavernous lobby of Vance Enterprises, her heart thudding in her chest. Alistair gave her a reassuring nod from a leather chair in the corner before burying his face in a newspaper. Alara took a deep breath and went to the front desk. She was told to wait, and so she waited. 10 minutes turned into 30. 30 minutes turned into an hour. It was a deliberate, petty act of cruelty, one last power play from Ms. Vance. Finally, Ms. Vance herself emerged from the elevator, a smug, triumphant look on her face. She didn't even acknowledge Alara, instead beginning a loud, performative conversation with a group of executives standing nearby. "Some people just have no sense of decorum or belonging," Ms. Vance said, her voice carrying across the polished marble floor, loud enough for everyone to hear. She gestured vaguely in Alara's direction. "They think they can just waltz in here, late, disheveled, bringing their pathetic little problems into a professional environment. It drags the whole place down." The executives chuckled politely. Alara stood frozen, her face burning with shame. This was worse than she could have imagined. She was being publicly humiliated. Ms. Vance finally turned her cold eyes on Alara. "Ah, Miss Thorne, so glad you could grace us with your presence. I trust you're here for your final papers? A word of advice for your future endeavors. Should you find any, try to show a little more ambition and a little less charity. It doesn't pay the bills." She thrust a clipboard at Alara. "Sign here." Alara's hand was trembling so badly she could barely hold the pen. She felt small, worthless, invisible. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give this cruel woman the satisfaction. She would sign the papers and leave with her dignity intact. But just as she was about to sign, a calm, commanding voice echoed through the lobby, cutting through the tense silence. "That will not be necessary." Everyone turned. Alistair was walking towards them. He had dropped the newspaper, and his entire demeanor had changed. The quiet, gentle man from the park was gone. In his place stood a figure of immense power and authority. His suit was impeccable, his posture commanding. His eyes filled with a cold, controlled fury that was directed squarely at Miss Vance. He moved with a sleek, predatory grace that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. He froze. Miss Vance's jaw dropped. The executives gasped. A collective, unspoken shock rippled through the lobby. Mr. Vance," she stammered, her face turning a ghastly shade of pale. I didn't know you were coming in today." Alistair didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on Alara, and in them, she saw a raw, protective tenderness that made her heart stop. He gently took the clipboard from her trembling hand and set it down on a nearby table. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft, for her alone. She could only nod, completely stunned, her mind reeling. Mr. Vance? Alistair was the Mr. Vance? The son of the founder? The new CEO? It didn't seem possible. He then turned his gaze back to Ms. Vance, and the temperature in the lobby seemed to drop by 20 degrees. "I have been reviewing the performance of our senior management," he began, his voice dangerously quiet but echoing with undeniable authority. "My father built this company on a foundation of integrity, respect, and a belief in people. He always said that how we treat the most vulnerable among us is the true measure of our character." He took a step closer to Ms. Vance, who visibly winced. "You, Ms. Vance, have just shown me your true character. You publicly humiliate a woman whose only crime was an act of profound compassion. An act, I might add, that was directed towards my own mother." A sharp, collective gasp went through the crowd of onlookers. Ms. Vance looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Your mother?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Yes," Alistair said, his voice like ice. "The stray, as you so eloquently put it. The emergency that you deemed less important than your quarterly reports. This woman, Alara Thorne, showed more integrity and humanity in that single moment than you have shown in your entire career." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "You mistake kindness for weakness. You mistake dignity for passivity. You are a liability to the culture of this company. You do not belong here." He used her own words against her, turning them into a verdict. "Pack your things. You're fired." Total silence. The power dynamic had not just been reversed. It had been utterly shattered. Ms. Vance stood there, her cruel mask stripped away, leaving only a pathetic, trembling woman. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Without another glance at her, Alistair turned back to Alara. He gently took her arm. "Come with me," he said softly. "Let's get you out of here." He led her through the stunned crowd, past the speechless executives and the disgraced Ms. Vance, and into the private elevator that went straight to the CEO's office. The elevator doors closed, encasing them in a soft, hushed silence. Alara's mind was a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, and a dawning, incredible hope. The man beside her, the man she had shared her deepest secrets with on a park bench, was the owner of this entire, gleaming empire. He was Alistair Vance. He led her into a cavernous, ornate office with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. He walked over to a polished bar and poured 2 glasses of water, his hand steady. He handed one to her. "I am so sorry, Alara," he said, his voice filled with a sincere, raw regret. "I am sorry for what you just went through, and I am sorry I didn't tell you who I was." She finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Why?" He looked out the window at the sprawling city below. "When I met you," he began, "I was lost. I was just the CEO, the grieving son. I was a title, not a person. With you, at the park, I was just Alistair. You saw me, the real me. I was afraid that if you knew about all of this, he gestured around the opulent office. You would see the title again, not the man. It was selfish of me, but I didn't want to lose that. Alara looked at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, and all her confusion melted away, replaced by a profound understanding. I always saw you, Alistair, she said softly. Just you. A slow smile spread across his face, a smile that finally reached his eyes, chasing away the last of the shadows. He closed the distance between them, taking her free hand in his. His touch was warm, steady. The day you helped my mother, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You did more than just help a lost woman. You woke me up. You reminded me of what's truly important. It's not this, he said, glancing around the room. It's kindness. It's connection. It's love. His gaze intensified, holding hers. I've been falling in love with you since that first day at the park, Alara. Maybe even before that. When I saw you in the rain, tears glistened in Alara's eyes. But this time, they were tears of joy. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. He lifted his hand and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. I want to offer you a job, he said. Not out of charity, but because you are exactly the kind of person I need in this company. I'm creating a new position, head of the Vance Foundation, our charitable arm. I want you to run it. I want you to take your compassion and use it to change the world on a scale you never imagined. Alara gasped. It was more than she could have ever dreamed of. A job where her kindness wasn't a liability, but her greatest asset. A chance to build a secure future for her and Leo. And I want more than that, Alistair continued, his voice dropping to a tender whisper. I want to build a life with you and Leo. If you'll have me, she didn't have to think. Her heart already knew the answer. Yes, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. Yes, he smiled. A smile of pure, cathartic joy, and then he leaned in and kissed her. A gentle, sacred promise of a new beginning. 1 year later, the pounding rain and biting cold were a distant memory, replaced by the golden glow of a late afternoon sun streaming through the large, clean windows of a beautiful, stately home. It wasn't cavernous or sterile like the Vance mansion. It was filled with warmth, laughter, and light. In the lush green backyard, Leo, now a happy, confident 6-year-old, was laughing as he threw a ball for a golden retriever. Alistair was pushing him on a swing, his face relaxed and filled with a love so profound it was visible to anyone who saw him. Sitting on the porch in a comfortable wicker chair was Genevieve. The haunted, distant look was gone from her eyes, replaced by a serene, joyful light. She was teaching Alara a new sign, her hands moving with the fluid grace of a dancer. Alara's hands followed, a little clumsy but filled with an earnest desire to learn. She was no longer the pale, fragile woman in the threadbare coat. She was vibrant, confident, her eyes shining with love and security. She was the respected and beloved head of the Vance Foundation, where she had already changed thousands of lives with her innovative and compassionate programs. She and Alistair had built a life together, a family forged from shared grief and redeemed by a selfless act of kindness. They had healed each other. Alistair walked over to the porch, wrapping his arms around Alara from behind and pressing a kiss to her temple. She leaned back against his chest, her heart full. Genevieve smiled at them, a pure, radiant smile, and signed, My family. My heart is full. Alara signed back, her movements now confident and sure. Ours, too. Alistair placed his hand over Alara's, adding his own sign. Forever. They stood there together, a perfect picture of happily ever after, bathed in the warm, amber hue of the setting sun. The silence was not empty or sterile. It was a soft hush filled with unspoken love, a testament to the fact that the most profound connections are often the ones that don't need words at all. This story is a testament to the quiet power of a single act of kindness. It reminds us that in a world that often values power and wealth, the true currency of the human spirit is compassion. Alara, in her moment of deepest hardship, chose empathy over self-preservation, and in doing so, She unknowingly set in motion a series of events that would not only save her, but would also heal the deep wounds of a broken family. Her simple, selfless act was a stone tossed into a still pond, creating ripples of love, hope, and redemption that touched everyone around her. It teaches us that we never know the silent battles others are fighting, and a small gesture of help can be a lifeline to someone drowning in sorrow. If this story touched your heart, please remember that there are Alaras and Alistairs all around us. People in need of help and people in need of a reason to give it. The world can feel cold and indifferent, much like the storm at the beginning of our tale, but each one of us has the capacity to be a warm shelter for someone else. Your kindness, no matter how small it may seem, can be the miracle that changes a life forever. We invite you to keep that light of compassion burning. Please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales for more soul-stirring stories that celebrate the best of the human heart. We'll see you in the next one.